what is a biologist?
I'd say a biologist is someone who has a passion to understand life. Depends on your niche, what your passion is, what you're interested in. So for me as a microbiologist, mine would be parasitology. Parasitology is my interest, a specific species of wasp. If there is a research project for it called Ampulex compressor, the American jeweled wasp. The wasp itself, which is the parasite, is actually its larvae. So the way the life cycle goes is a female wasp will hunt down and find an American cockroach, and she will size it up to make sure that she can subdue it, take it out, because the cockroaches are a lot larger than the wasps. The wasps are only a few centimeters long. She will firstly sting the cockroach in its thorax. For the first sting in the thorax is it will paralyze the front two legs, so she can administer a second sting into the brain of the cockroach. Has to be very precise with this, because if she injects too much venom, she will completely shut off the cockroach's brain, killing it. Those precision elements are what makes the topic of parasitology very interesting to me. So I think there is something for everyone, and I do say that wholeheartedly. In the biosciences, there's something for everyone.
Hello and welcome to the Knowness podcast, the vault of knowledge. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Knowness podcast. Today we'll be talking to our biology subject lead, Amaan Ahmed, who's got a degree in biological sciences as well as a master's. We'll be delving into what he thinks biology is, where his passion came from, and a bit more on his special interest on parasitology. So join us as we delve into this in this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Knowness podcast. Today we're joined by our resident biology subject lead, and we're going to have a nice discussion on biology, what biology means to him, his special interest within biology, and just kind of general chat around that. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for the warm welcome this evening.
Yeah, of course.
My name's Amaan. I'm the subject lead in biology at Knowness, and let's have a great discussion.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with kind of your background, right? Your kind of educational background. Did you go to university? What did you study in university? Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Leicester, the University of Leicester, and my degree title was Biological Sciences, and then I specialised in microbiology in my second year.
Gotcha.
And then currently, right now, I'm doing my master's at the University of Birmingham in Microbiology and Infection.
Okay, and you say biological sciences, not biology. Yeah. What's kind of like the difference at university level between those two?
So some UK institutions will offer a biology degree, and then other universities will offer a biological sciences degree.
Gotcha.
And the difference between them is the versatility. So the way I saw it was a biological sciences degree has much more versatility in the modules you can choose. So you can choose from a variety of more connected disciplines, also biochemistry, microbiology, parasitology, whereas the biology degrees, they're more uniform, so they're more structured and they're more set out with less leeway in what you study. So that's why I went for the biological sciences route.
Okay, that makes sense. And with the masters as well, why did you decide to go for that one?
The reason I wanted to do a master's, it wasn't initially planned, but the reason being I want to do a PhD. So I feel as if the skills you learn in your master's, they're essential for the practical element, and then the bioinformatics element, which is becoming increasingly more common when it comes to degrees associated or academia associated with the biosciences. So that's the reason why I went for a master's as well.
And do you know what you want to do your PhD in? I think off camera you mentioned about parasitic wasps.
Yeah. So parasitology is my interest. Gotcha. Is my really, really strong interest in biology. And so a specific species of wasp, if there is a research project for it called Ampulex compressor, the American jeweled wasp, it'd be amazing to do a PhD in that. So,
I can imagine. Yeah. But it's confusing to me because when you say like a parasitic wasp, it's hard for me to imagine exactly what that is. When you say a parasite, right, I kind of think of like, because of playing like The Last of Us or watching the TV show, the cordyceps virus, which is kind of like a fungal virus that infects like insects and stuff like that, and has like this fungal thing grow out of it. Is that what the cordyceps is? Yeah, so cordyceps is a fungal pathogen, as you mentioned, but it's not restricted to one species. There's many different species of cordyceps. So some are non-pathogenic, and then some are pathogenic, as you mentioned. That's what influenced The Last of Us. Yeah. Because when you say that's the kind of why I think about. But with the wasps, it's kind of hard to imagine that being. How does that work? Do they prey on like certain species and they're parasitic in that sense, or do they kind of like latch on to spiders or whatever it may be?
Yeah, so in the similar fashion with cordyceps, parasitic wasps, they're very varied. So there's so
I
many
can
different
imagine, yeah,
species,
yeah.
and these species are distinct and they have distinct host pathogen relationships. So as I mentioned, the American cockroach wasp, its host is a cockroach,
Gotcha.
and
yeah.
it's not the wasp itself which is the parasite. It's actually its larvae, so it's baby which is the parasite.
Yeah.
There's actually a name for this. It's called kleptoparasitism.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so the way the life cycle goes is a female wasp will hunt down and find an American cockroach, and she will size it up to make sure that she can subdue it, take it out, because the cockroaches are a lot larger than the wasps. The wasps are only a few centimeters long.
Oh yeah, I don't know why I was thinking of like a large wasp.
These wasps are tiny.
Yeah.
So what she will do is she will firstly sting the cockroach in its thorax. A very well placed sting.
Why is it a thorax? Is it
the reason for the first sting in the thorax is it will paralyze the front two legs.
And you need to get it in the thorax.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So once the front two legs are paralyzed of the cockroach, it really debilitates it. It's very difficult for the cockroach to escape.
Is that like a permanent paralysis or?
It's temporary.
Okay.
It is temporary.
Yeah.
But the reason the wasp does the legs first, goes for the legs first, is so she can administer a second sting into the brain of the cockroach.
Oh,
and
okay.
She has to be very precise with this, because if she injects too much venom, she will completely shut off the cockroach's brain, killing it effectively.
And you can't really use it if it's dead.
You can't use it if it's dead. But then if she administers too less of a dose, the dopamine receptors are still active.
Gotcha.
And then eventually that first thing, the venom will wear off, and the cockroach will run away.
Yeah.
So those precision elements are what makes the topic of parasitology very interesting.
I was going to say, because that seems like
it has to be immensely precise, as you mentioned. Immensely
and
precise.
it's a very small insect and two small insects. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, oh, it's interesting. That has to be that precise.
Yeah. So once the paralyzation has occurred, the wasp will bite off one of the antennae of the cockroach and take a little bit of hemolymph to rejuvenate itself, because now it has to drag the cockroach back to its burrow. And remember, like we established at the start, the cockroach is a lot bigger and a lot heavier than the wasp.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So it has to drag it across, desert. And then there's other predators who are looking to get a free meal
on either of them.
On either of them. So eventually, once she makes it back to her burrow, she lays a single egg on the exoskeleton of the cockroach.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then she closes up the burrow with stones, rocks, closes it up so nothing can get in.
Nothing can come and eat them or disturb them. Yeah.
So then once the larvae hatch, it burrows deep into the exoskeleton of the cockroach and starts eating around the flesh. But the key aspect here, though, about this form of parasitism is the larvae, through millions of years of evolution, has evolved to know to avoid consuming the internal organs to keep the meat fresh for as long as possible.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because if the larvae went for the heart or the brain immediately, it would
be dead straight away. Then it started rot, decompose.
So it knows to avoid the key internal organs and go for them last.
That's crazy. Yeah, something that small would
to keep the flesh as fresh for as long as possible.
Gotcha, yeah.
And then eventually a fully formed cockroach wasp emerges from the husk. And these wasps, they're actually very beautiful. They're called jewel wasps for a reason. They're very iridescent colors. And it's only the females that have these colors. The males, they have much more of a bland patterning. But the females, they have a really nice color on them.
That's really interesting. That's how they do it. Is that required for them to reproduce?
It's essential to their life cycle.
Is it?
Yeah, it's essential.
And they have to. Okay, that's very. Is it just I'm guessing? Is it just these wasps that do this with the cockroaches, or is there?
So there's other species. So you have, for example, the tarantula hawk wasp.
Because I was going to mention that's the one I've heard about. I don't know what it really
so this one's a little bit more famous, and because obviously these wasps hunt cockroaches, and the stings of these wasps are actually very incredibly painful to humans as well, and they can
cause cockroach ones.
Not the cockroach, the tarantula hawk.
Yes, that's right. Because I've heard that the sting from it is known to be very,
very, very painful, because they actually do cause local paralysis if you are stung by one, and it's immensely painful. So the life cycle to these is somewhat similar in that a female wasp will go out and hunt a tarantula. And as you can imagine, hunting a tarantula shouldn't really be an easy thing, but the sting is so powerful, all it takes is one sting.
And then that's
and
it.
once the tarantula has been stung, it's
done. It's a done deal.
It's a done deal. It'll do the same thing. It will drag the tarantula back to its burrow, lay an egg on the tarantula, and the larva will go to work and eat through
where it's appropriate and avoid where it's not.
Avoid where it's not, to keep the meat fresh for as long as possible. And then the newly formed wasp will emerge and continue the life cycle again.
That's very interesting. Like just how like precise all of these little things have to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's also somewhat amusing to me personally is that it's always the females of these species. Whereas the males, they will consume like rotting fruit. And then a lot of some of these male flies will get drunk on the fermentation.
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah. Rather than like the precise process. I see what you mean. The comparison is kind of funny. Yeah. So okay, what are kind of like other examples of like this kind of like when it comes to like parasitic wasps? Is it just this process of laying its eggs into a victim or a species, or are there other ways of it being parasitic, like that parasitic relationship?
Yeah. So the whole basis of a parasitic relationship is one organism benefits at the other's detriment.
At the expense of the other one.
At the expense of the other one. So there's always that relationship involved where the host in the end will either have to perish or suffer really, really dire consequences
because of it.
Another interesting example I'll bring up is there's a specific type of barnacle, and it infects crabs. Gotcha. Now, it only infects male crabs. It doesn't infect female crabs.
The female ones, okay.
And the reason being is what it does is it literally sterilizes the male crab, it starts releasing estrogen into the crab, basically rendering the crab from a male crab to a female crab. So then the barnacle lays its eggs within the crab, and the crab gains maternal instincts to take care of those barnacle,
as if it was
barnacle offspring, like it's its own.
That's so interesting. Like all these little different ways of like parasites essentially acting out their functions.
These relationships, they've evolved over millions of years, and so they're very complex. They're very intricate, and
that's very interesting. So that's kind of like the what you want to get into. Essentially, is it studying that, or is it?
So that research, the academia behind that is very interesting to me. And
I can imagine,
to be able to communicate that with other people who are also passionate about it. It'd be incredible.
I can imagine it's very rewarding. So if you move on to kind of like the general topic of biology, right? And when you say general, like we really mean very general, right? I guess the first question I have for you is what does that mean? What is biology to you? What does it mean to you?
Biology to me means, again, it's somewhat cliche, but it's life. So the various connections and relationships that we form, be it with our gut microbiome or the microbiome associated with our blood, that new microbiologists and hematologists are coming out with new research every day. So these intricate relationships, they form us and who we are and the planet that we live on. And we don't appreciate how these little things impact our day-to-day life. So like, for example, there's even research suggesting that our gut microbiome, the health of it, impacts our mental health, our well-being.
I do remember seeing something like this about the link between mental health and the gut biome. And it's also crazy seeing how linked the gut biome is to like our everyday activities and stuff like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I have heard that your gut biome partially dictates what you like and what you don't like food wise. Right? And everyone has like a unique like gut biome.
So the reason being is babies, when they're in the womb, they're sterile. There's not a gut microbiome
so there's nothing there.
There's nothing there at that. It's a clean slate, and then it begins depending on how you are born. Your gut microbiome. So if you are born via a C-section, your gut microbiome will be incredibly different to someone who was born naturally.
Oh, okay.
And that's also your skin microbiome as well. So that is influencing
your skin. And it's good bacteria and bad bacteria.
Good bacteria and bad bacteria. And that dictates who you are for the rest of your life, because everyone's gut microbiome is unique to them.
Exactly. That's very interesting. And I guess it's one of those areas of biology which we know a decent amount about, but we still don't fully understand all of it.
More and more research is going on now. So an incredible amount of research has been going on regarding the gut microbiome and its effects onto us, and how important it is to our daily lives.
And how, when it comes to biology specifically, how important do you think it is in terms of a subject to be taught, right? Because in all, all university, in all secondary schools and stuff like that, it's always there as like a subject, right? It's a part of the science subjects, and it's something we've grown to be accustomed to and normalized to having biology as like a subject, right? But how important do you think it is? How important do you think it is that people should know about biology, and to what extent should we know?
So I'd say how important as a subject it is, it's vitally important
Yeah.
because it's basically the foundation of how we exist, how we came to exist and how we interact with so many other species and organisms around us on a day-to-day basis. But then to what extent should be taught, I think it should be taught is subjective.
Yeah.
Because, you can start from a very basic level and then you can get to a very intricate level. And I think that's where an individual's own curiosities would take over, how much they want to apply themselves to the subject. So it depends. It depends really on how immersed you want to be, into a topic. But I do agree in that it should be taught up to a secondary school level. Yeah.
What about beyond? Do you think it should be?
Do you
think it's still a case where it depends on the
it depends on the individual, I'd say, because there's a plethora of other subjects out there. And biosciences within itself is so diverse. So I think there is something for everyone. There's something for everyone. And I do say that wholeheartedly. In the biosciences, there's something for everyone. You just got to find it. You just got to...
No, 100%. There's so many like aspects of biology which I find is super interesting. Even like the gut biome and even the whole concept of, I'm not sure if you've heard of the whole idea of like a vanishing twin.
Yeah.
Where in the womb you may have two different embryos, and then one gets absorbed by the other. This kind of stuff like that. I find it super interesting. But what other like aspects of biology do you find really interesting that the general public might not really know much about? Because I know we spoke about the parasitic wasps. That's one of them. Anything else?
So genetics is a big thing as well.
Yeah,
I'm
I can imagine.
Really interested in genetics. It's obviously the foundations
of humans, of life, of everyone.
Every organism. It all comes down to our genetics. And so the genetics, especially when it comes to controlling phenotypes, is another thing I'm very interested in. So
what do you mean by controlling phenotypes? What is that?
So the genes that control our hair color, our eye color. Our physical self, basically.
How we look externally.
How we look externally.
Yeah.
So, for example, did you know that 8 genes in total play a role in what eye color we come out with?
8 genes? I thought it was like one. Or
8 genes.
Crazy.
8 genes in total.
And they work together
work together to give us our own distinct eye color.
Yeah.
Basically. So even though some people may say brown eyes all look the same, it's actually not. There's slight variations in terms of how much melanin is released depending on the activation of those 8 genes. So some people may have lighter brown eyes, some people may have darker brown eyes. Some people then we get onto the other various eye colors like hazel eyes, blue eyes. And then speaking of blue eyes, all blue-eyed people descended from one common ancestor. Some researchers say in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
So
was that like a genetic mutation that eventually led rise to...
So they do say a genetic mutation occurred approximately 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And all descendants
from that point onwards ended up having that.
They can trace that lineage back to one ancestor.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember growing up, I always had this idea that when it comes to like the whole like phenomenon of like gene editing or that kind of stuff, it would be one gene for one characteristic, right? Like for example, like for your hair color, it'd be one gene, strength, intelligence, one gene. But I guess using the example of eye color, it's probably like a lot of different things that work together. So what's kind of your thoughts on like gene editing then? It's a very I guess it's a relatively new thing. When it comes to the ethics of it, what do you think?
So as you can imagine, the ethical considerations behind gene editing are still very severe. So a lot of countries around the world, they have strict regulations on gene editing and what can be done with it. But as research continues, we're opening up to certain possibilities of gene editing. So you may have heard of CRISPR-Cas9. It's a relatively recently discovered gene editing therapy by 2 incredible women. One of them being Jennifer Doudna. They both won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for this amazing discovery. CRISPR-Cas9 was actually discovered. It's a bacterial mechanism that bacteria use to cleave out bacteriophage DNA that they find within their genome.
Gotcha.
So it was used to combat phages. So phages are viruses that infect bacteria, basically.
Yeah.
And it's basically, so when a bacteria reads its own DNA and it sees phage DNA within
The
it.
incorrect and wrong
incorrect.
part,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's like, no, I need to get rid of you, and it cuts.
So what
it
they're
out.
doing is they're taking that same kind of concept and applying it to humans. Seeing the incorrect DNA and removing it.
Yes, absolutely.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, but as you could imagine, there are ethical considerations that come with that have to be considered very seriously when it comes to gene
and the
editing.
misuse of that kind of technology.
Yeah, and then stemming on from CRISPR-Cas9, Russia is a big prominent user of phage therapy.
Yeah.
So it's not legalized in the UK as of yet, and across much of the world. But phage therapy is utilizing phages to cure diseases and infections where antibiotic resistance is rampant, and antibiotics are no longer curing, stopping infections. So they send in bacteriophages to lyse, to cause lysis on those bacteria cells and to stamp out the infection. But there's issues with that as well, because a lot of the times some research has actually found that phages can incorporate their DNA into the human genome, and so into our own genomes, which is a very, very problematic
issue.
It's a very big issue. So,
but that's what I was going to ask. How safe really is this? Because when it comes to bacteria, we can quite easily, or not easily, but relatively easily measure the effect and see the effect of removing certain DNA and certain bits of the DNA from the bacteria. Whereas with the humans, it's significantly more complex than that. So how safe really is it?
As of right now, I'd still say the research is preliminary.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot more work that needs to be done.
There's a lot more that we don't know than what we do know.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of unknowns, unanswered questions, because no two phages are the same.
Yeah.
Phages are very specific to the bacteria that are their hosts. The same way, so we have Pseudomonas aeruginosa, for example, a very commensal bacteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends. It depends on that specific host interaction, that specific relationship that they have. So safety and those ethical considerations still need to come about with research that is ongoing.
But I think the most interesting part of all of this is how often in biology and in medicine and so on, we kind of mirror nature. There's a lot of processes in nature that we observe, and we start to kind of incorporate that into our lives. If you look at like a physics example, I guess, like echolocation and using sonar technology, that kind of I find that very interesting. Like, what other things are there within biology that kind of does that? I know, so that's one example with physics. What other examples kind of are there, if you can remember any?
Regarding what specifically would you say?
So just any examples where we see stuff that occur in real life and with animals or biology in general, and we kind of mirror that in our own technologies.
So a big example of that would be biotechnology.
Yeah.
So for example, prebiotics, probiotics. So the yogurts we have, for example, they contain live cultures of beneficial bacteria.
Yeah.
For example, lactobacillus strains. Yeah. And when we consume these bacteria fill niches within our gut microbiome that can't be colonized by harmful strains of bacteria such as E. coli.
Yeah.
And they're really beneficial because these bacteria not only prevent and outcompete harmful bacteria, some of these bacteria can synthesize vitamins for us. They work in tandem with our immune system to keep us safe.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good point that you've raised there, that a topic we can stem off from is that bacteria do get a really bad rep.
I was going to say, because whenever I see these, it's hard to imagine what a good bacteria is or what it does. And a lot of these probiotic companies and these brands will promote it and say things like, "Oh, this is healthy for you. It helps with your immunity," that kind of stuff. But I've always had the perception that's kind of like a marketing tactic. Like, how much validity do these claims have?
They do. They actually do, because for the most part, the majority of bacteria living within us or on our skin, they're actually beneficial. They don't want to harm us. Yeah, they don't want to harm us. And some of them, they're actually not even harmful or beneficial. They just want a place to live.
Gotcha.
They just want a place to live.
So there's no net negative or positive gain for them. Yeah.
Especially a lot of skin commensal bacteria.
Yeah. So they kind of
they just want a place to live,
rent free.
Yeah. And without the beneficial bacteria that we have within our gut microbiome or our skin, we wouldn't be alive.
Yeah.
We literally would not be alive without them.
I find it so bizarre, how important these things are, yeah, we don't really talk about it. We can't even see it. It's not really mentioned. Do you know what I mean? I find that quite remarkable. Yeah. But when it comes to like I said, with these probiotics and that kind of stuff, that's kind of like I mentioned earlier, kind of mirroring what nature's already got for us and kind of using that for our own benefit and taking inspiration from nature, essentially, which I think is really cool. So kind of moving on from that and going on to back to the kind of like your special interest, which is of the parasitology and stuff like that. Where do you see yourself long term with that? Do you see yourself in an educator kind of role where you raise education and awareness about parasitic wasps, or from like a research perspective, or what's it looking like?
I'd see myself leaning more towards the academia and research side, rather than industry or the clinical side.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is I like to communicate my passion and these research areas to other people who are also interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
So
a gateway into that.
Yeah, through lectures and then research in the lab.
Yeah,
that would be incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine. And is this like interest of parasitology what you want to do long term, or what's your kind of goals?
Yeah, potentially long term.
Mm-hmm.
So my aim is to do a PhD, hopefully,
Yeah.
and then get into academia, and
Mm-hmm.
then spread awareness about parasitology and how much of an interesting topic it actually is, because it's very interesting, and even within parasitology, there's so much to it as well. So,
I was gonna say, just from like the limited thing that we spoke about so far, it's already so interesting. The only thing that I, prior to this, kind of knew about parasitology was again with the cordyceps virus, or was it a fungus?
Yeah, it's a fungal.
The fungal cordyceps fungus, and that's just from again from video games, from The Last of Us. It's not something that's like very common knowledge. You know what I mean? So I do think that parasitology is something that is very like not really looked at, not really known about as well. So I think like raising that kind of awareness and education about it is very interesting. I think. But what other kind of aspects of biology do you think are a bit like overlooked? People don't really pay much attention to.
I'd say an up and coming field within biology in general is data science. So
within biology,
within biology, and it's not exclusive to biology. It's prominent across chemistry and physics as well.
Yeah, I know data science is very big.
But it's a lot bigger in chemistry and physics than it was in biology. But now, as biology actually is now classed as a data science as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of the amount of data that we deal with, be it from genetics to ecology to microbiology.
Yeah.
It's very important to have a basic understanding of the mathematical principles and the data handling principles
behind biology.
Yeah, behind biology and associated with biology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So kind of guess like the maths, the equations, the statistical analysis.
Analysis, kind of being able to run statistical tests or being proficient with the use of statistical software, so like RStudio or GraphPad Prism. It's you when you're in academia and when you're researching these topics, it's essential to communicate these ideas to your fellow peers, your colleagues in the lab, when it comes to conferences and presentations. So getting comfortable with that at this early stage when you enter the field is paramount.
So that's a lot. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. I see. I guess kind of stemming on from that. Yeah. So when I think about a lawyer, what's a lawyer? I have a good idea of what a lawyer is, what a lawyer does. When I think of a doctor, I've got a pretty good idea of what a doctor is, what a doctor does. But what is a biologist? How would you describe if someone was to ask you, what is a biologist and what do they do? How would you answer that?
I'd say a biologist is someone who has a passion to understand life, the relationships of life. And like we mentioned before, it's very subjective in the sense of what type of biologist. You could be a marine biologist, you could be a microbiologist, you could be a mycologist, which is someone who studies fungi. So it depends on the type of biologist that you are.
Yeah,
but it's someone who has.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it depends on your niche, what your passion is, what you're interested in. So for me as a microbiologist, mine would be parasitology. So branching on to parasitology.
That's your kind of like interest in biology. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, that's very interesting. I think even like within like I still find it crazy just how many different subsections that come under biology. You got, like you said, marine biology, human biology, and out of all of those, which one do you think that is there one specific to parasitology, or is parasitology that?
Parasitology is its own field.
Is that is its own field?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's its own field.
And you think it's growing, or is it kind of like?
It is growing. It is growing. In the UK, there's potentially not as big of a scope for parasitology because our climate isn't as
Adjusted
as
towards,
warm.
yeah. I was gonna say there's not that many here.
The majority of parasites that infect humans, for example, they're more in the more temperate, warmer climates, closer to the equator across the globe. So the scopes for parasitology in those regions would be much more immense compared to the scope for parasitology in the UK.
And when you mentioned it earlier as well about the tarantula wasp and even the other species, is it the American cockroach wasp? I find it so interesting, like how it lays its eggs inside just for it to hatch out. And it's kind of like in, I don't know if you've seen it, the movie Alien, where the I think it's xenomorph lays its eggs inside the human and it comes out like that. But the reason I mention that is because you see these examples of the insects, of these parasites affecting these insects. But have we ever seen that, occurring within a human or is that a thing? How does that, how does that look within humans?
We have nematode parasitic nematodes which infect humans. So tapeworms are a big example that infect humans. I remember.
And do they work in the same way where they go inside, they lay the eggs, and then
a similar way?
Gotcha.
It's similar. I remember in the 1950s, they used to sell tapeworm eggs to women, and for other people who wanted to lose weight.
Oh, it was like a weight loss.
Weight loss because they'd consumed the
wherever
the
they
eggs. And then once they'd consumed the eggs, the eggs would hatch.
So kind of like it's like kind of leeches, like kind of like therapeutic kind of. Oh, that's a bit. And I'm guessing because of the many negative effects of it, they decided over time that wasn't the right thing to do. Okay, but there's nothing like like a type of parasite that would infect us and explode out of our stomach or anything like that.
Nothing that extreme yet. So,
you
have, for example, the larva of the tsetse fly.
Yeah,
it causes African sleeping sickness. So when the fly lays its egg within just below the epidermis of the human skin layer, once the fly has consumed the nutrients in the blood that it needs, it will start popping out.
Oh, so we do
skin.
have that, but like on a very
small scale. It will start popping out of the skin and eventually
that's very hard,
and it is very painful from what I've heard. It's
I can imagine. Painful, that does not sound very nice. I'm guessing that's quite like a rare and uncommon thing.
It's common in sub-Saharan Western Africa.
Oh, is it?
It's common over there, but there's a lot more education in public health on how to stop infections from occurring.
Gotcha. How to reduce
more programs are occurring on how to prevent
education
infection.
And stuff
education
like that.
on how to prevent that.
And I think there was one. I don't remember this if I'm thinking correctly, but a form of parasite that affects cats, and it alters. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, and it alters their behavior quite a lot.
Yeah, Toxoplasma gondii.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So how does that work? What does that do?
I don't think it.
Or is that not really a parasite?
It is a parasite.
Okay.
It's a blood parasite, I believe.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it doesn't change the behavior in cats per se, but it changes the behavior in mice that are infected.
It was the that's what it was. Yeah.
So it makes the mice less fearful of cats.
Yeah.
So mice will actually interact with cats. Some mice that have been observed who are infected with this pathogen.
So I guess it turns them a bit, crazy or suicidal in a way where they are infected by this and they lose the inhibition or the ability to understand like that cat is a threat, and they ignore it.
Yeah, and the reason being is because the cat is an obligate host, meaning that the parasite needs the cat in order to survive, in order to reproduce, which is why the mice become more inert in the presence of cats.
Yeah.
So they will get eaten and then it will propagate the life cycle.
So it's the parasite's way of basically using the mouse, we'll call it Jerry in this case, to find Tom and then to go inside Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's very. I see stuff like this. I find so fascinating because it's just so you don't really see stuff like this in other animals or mammals. Like this level of like complexity it's kind of villainous in a way. You know what I mean? Like how they're finding their way into finding their own ways of reproducing in quite sinister ways as well. Again, that's very very. I hope it doesn't spread to humans in that way. Especially the toxoplasmosis one.
Humans do get infected with toxoplasmosis.
Oh, is it the same thing? Is it? How does it work with them then?
But we're intermediary hosts, so we're not essential.
Okay.
We're not essential. Humans usually get it from contaminated cat litter. So when we clean up after our pets, yeah. And there's some research, theoretical, um, potentially stating that toxoplasma actually makes humans more erratic as well,
Oh,
and
I see.
it actually makes us more aggressive.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
there's some literature linking the outbreak of Toxoplasma gondii to the French Revolution.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Any reason why, or
it, it makes
was
it
it just a
makes
link?
it makes individuals more aggressive.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
individuals,
and
yeah,
as a result,
yeah.
the
As a
reshaping that
result,
kind of helped.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
okay. No, that's very interesting. And so with this whole this kind of concept of parasitology at the moment, what is it that you're doing? Is it just wasps you're researching into, or like in terms of your interests?
My interests, as of right now,
Mm-hmm.
the parasitic wasp is a big one for
Yeah.
me. So I really enjoy looking at the different
And you hope to
species
like
of
do a
parasites.
PhD within that.
Yeah, yeah. My aim
Okay.
is to do a PhD within that.
Mm-hmm.
There's other parasites that also I'm somewhat interested in as well.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the crab example is a big
Yeah,
one.
that's a very
And
very
then
unique one. Yeah.
there's another it's pretty horrific, but it's a really cool
No,
example.
based on all these ones, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool example. It's a species of parasitic wasp again, but it infects a specific type of web weaving spider.
Oh, okay.
And what it does
Mm-hmm.
is the wasp lays the larva on the back of this orb weaving spider. So orb weavers are a group of spiders that build these amazing webs, really beautiful
Yeah,
webs.
yeah,
And it won't kill it immediately. What it
Yeah.
does is it latches onto the back of the spider
mm-hmm.
and it will drain its hemolymph, its blood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what happens is it will force the spider to construct a cocoon for it
Yeah.
from its webbing.
Oh, I
And
see.
then
Okay.
once the spider has constructed the cocoon,
Mm-hmm.
the webbed cocoon for the larvae,
Yeah.
it will kill it.
Oh, I
It
see.
will
So
kill
you're
it. It will kill
hijacking
it.
it
Yeah,
and using it for this purpose.
it will kill it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it will wrap it. The parasite will wrap itself in the
Mhm.
silk and then emerge as a new wasp. At the
Yeah.
end.
That's fascinating. Like how it essentially just takes its blood, takes its purpose, its role, its function, uses it for itself, and then kills it when it's done. Yeah. And is there? I think there was one for. Is it for cows as well? Like a parasite that specifically affects cows, or I might be thinking of something completely different.
Potentially.
Yeah, I might. There's a
Yeah, there's so many parasites to keep track of.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
so
I can imagine it's hard to
it's
remember
hard
every
to keep
little
track
one.
of them all.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
My ones, I think the parasites I'm really interested to are the ones that infect invertebrates and arachnids, so spiders,
Gotcha.
or
Yeah,
wasps.
yeah.
So those entomological
Mm-hmm.
relationships are really interesting to
Gotcha.
me. Yeah.
And with the cordyceps, we're going back to that one because I that's one I find particularly interesting, especially because like the game it was in is one of my favorite games. But what are the likelihood or the chances or even the possibility of that spreading to humans and for that same kind of fungus to affect humans?
Yeah, so this is a very Last of Us question.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's a very Last of Us question. As of right now, I'd say it's quite unlikely.
Yeah.
The reason being, we're very complex organisms. So
Yeah,
our
yeah.
host immune defense systems is very, very complex. Our
Compared
immune
to like a
system,
spider or ant.
yes, our immune system is extremely complex, extremely diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, we could be immune to every pathogen,
Mm-hmm.
every disease known to man.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our immune system adapts. The complement system adapts.
It's
to-
very different to like
yeah,
other organisms that don't really
yeah,
have that.
yeah.
So with us, I guess it's dependent on the situation, on the illness, on the bacteria, the virus. Yeah, it's very
Yes.
actually it's very adaptive. So
Yes.
yeah, I guess if it would come into contact with something like that, I'd say we're quite resilient in defending it. I guess. But then how does it work? How does it spread within the communities? This cordyceps fungus. How does that work?
So as I mentioned, once the stalk has grown out of the brain of the ant and
Mhm.
it starts releasing spores over the colony, these spores then get inhaled by the ants and it goes into their brain
Oh,
through
okay.
the spirocytes. So the way
So it's like an airborne.
it's
Gotcha.
the spores are spread through the air and then they manage to get into the brain of the ant. And once
Gotcha.
they're in the brain, they begin to grow
Mm-hmm.
and then they hijack.
They hijack its
Yeah,
functions.
yeah,
it's the ant itself, and then the
yeah.
same process
The
repeats.
same process repeats.
Goes around,
yeah.
spreads the spores. Okay, that's very interesting. And again, going back to like parasitic relationships, right? And So one example they mentioned with the wasp is how they hijack an organism and use it to reproduce, similar to the crabs as well. Whereas with the cordyceps, that's again it's a very similar function. Are there categories of like these parasitic relationships, or how is it organized?
Categories in what sense?
Categories in sense of how it functions, how the parasite functions, right?
In terms of complexity.
Yeah, yeah.
So some relationships are inevitably going to be more complex than others.
Yeah.
So, for example, the American cockroach wasp, with those stings, they have to be very
I was
precise.
gonna say that's an example where it's a very complex and
Yes,
carefully
yes,
planned.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the venom of that wasp,
Mm-hmm.
it's evolved over millions of years. So it's so precise in that it targets only the dopamine receptors in the brain of the cockroach.
Yeah.
Nothing else. It's
Gotcha.
very
Yeah, yeah.
exclusive.
It's a very like
It's
specific.
very exclusive, very specific.
Compared to the
So-
cordyceps was a bit more broad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Cordyceps, I believe it doesn't target one neurotransmitter in particular.
Gotcha.
It just tries to hijack the brain as
In
a
general,
whole.
yeah. And then you move on from
Yeah,
there.
because the ant is still conscious, but it's in a zombie-like state where it's moving around trying to fight the urge
Mm-hmm.
of the infection that's got a hold
That's
of it.
so it's literally
Yeah.
like a zombie ant.
yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And when it comes to like parasitology in general, what do you think are kind of like the areas that are not really well understood so far?
I'd say
Stuff that what areas of parasitology do you think at the moment require more research and more knowledge? Or do we not know yet?
it's a tough question to answer because the areas that require more research, it depends on the funding, whether the funding's available for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously, even in the sciences, as sad as it is to say, everything comes with a financial incentive.
Yeah.
So if there's not a financial incentive to get some research done,
mm-hmm.
then it's not
You
going
just
to
won't
happen.
really,
Yeah.
which is very sad. It's kind of like a harsh.
Yeah,
reality.
it's just a harsh reality, be it in the pharmaceutical industry, be it in the microbiology industry,
Yeah.
in all of science. Where there's not a financial incentive, people are not going to be inclined to do the research that is required.
Yeah, which is hard to, it's hard to see. I guess there's benefits in some senses where medical technologies and stuff like that will get a lot of funding. But I guess with parasitology, I do understand your perspective of how you may not be able to get it. And look into it, because I guess if you had enough funding, there's so much you could research and look into. But I guess it's a question of, is it necessary? Does it justify the costs? Kind of thing. But I guess if you did, let's say hypothetically, you had as much funding as you wanted, what aspect of biology or human biology or parasitology would you want to research into? And we're talking, let's say hypothetically, unlimited budget. What would you do?
Me personally,
You personally,
or
yeah.
what's needed in biology right now?
Let's do both, yeah. But let's start with you personally.
Me
What do you think?
personally, I'd really like to continue research in parasitic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Those interactions of host pathogen relationships is really interesting.
So I guess kind of getting a stronger understanding of how it works, why it works.
yeah.
Okay. And then what do you think? What's needed?
What's needed? I'd say malaria for me potentially is a big one. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, because I didn't know this. I saw something online that said the biggest who kills the most humans? What organism kills the most humans? Right, and it was mosquitoes.
Yeah. But now, like we mentioned before, the sleeping sickness, there's more public health available in Africa.
Yeah, there's more awareness and stuff like that. I think it only recently got eradicated from Egypt.
Yeah. And the second one would be Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So tuberculosis infections. I believe last year, 1.8 million people passed away from tuberculosis.
That's a lot. That's a lot more than I thought it'd be.
It's a lot of people. And
I'm guessing in the third world rather than...
Yeah. So the vaccine, the BCG vaccine
Mm-hmm.
for tuberculosis is extremely outdated. It's extremely outdated. And because, again, there's no financial incentive because it only affects third world countries. There's no reason, quote unquote, for pharmaceutical companies to develop a novel vaccine for the new strains of Mycobacterium tuberculosis that are out there. Right now, many of us could be infected with a latent form of Mycobacterium tuberculosis that's not active. It's not actively causing infection. We just don't know it.
Yeah, which is very scary to think about.
It's a very, very scary thing to think.
But again, it goes back to what you're saying, how you could have a team of people who really want to do it, who are dedicated, who are passionate. But again, you need money for these kinds of things, and if the people who are not willing to fund it because it's seen as a relatively small issue, then you can't really, do it that way, I guess. But I guess another, again, related to that unlimited funding kind of question, what's like, What do you think if you were to combine both? What was something that you would want to do that you're very interested in, that's kind of underlooked, and something that also would benefit the world? What's that kind of area? What's something you would do? A combination of both. What would you do?
I'd say I'd link it back to mycobacterium tuberculosis.
You still go for that
yeah,
one? Yeah,
I think I'd link it back to that. There are others that are more personal, I'd say, but they wouldn't have a major impact on humans per se, on society as a whole.
Gotcha.
Seeing that 1.8 million people passed away from tuberculosis
Crazy
last
number,
year is pretty serious.
And that's something that should never have like reached that stage. To begin with the vaccine and whatnot. But no, yeah, that's really. And the thing is with when it comes to like parasites, again linking back to that, there's not really like a vaccine for that, is there? Because it doesn't work in that way.
No, especially we'll give the example of cordyceps because they're funguses. And funguses are eukaryotic organisms.
Yep.
We are eukaryotic organisms. So the internal machinery within eukaryotic cells will be the same across the board. So they'll have similar ribosomes to us. So ribosomes is the machinery that plugs together our proteins, which makes our polypeptide chains. And then those proteins go on to make keratin, which is what our nails are made of.
Yeah.
Collagen, which is what our skin and our hair is made of. So to create a medication that would target funguses, it'd be targeting ourselves as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to create antifungals, it has to be very, very specialized, very specific in what we target.
As not to affect the human itself.
Yeah. So the way mycologists research this is they target chitin, which is the component fungi are known for to have in their cell walls.
I'm guessing that's not something that we have.
We don't have that.
So they can specifically target that and not worry about backlash.
But like antimicrobial resistance, you get antifungal resistance. So there's some fungal pathogens out there that are resistant to antifungals.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I mean, kind of linking to that as well, I find it really interesting the whole concept of organ rejection.
Yeah.
Which is something not a lot of people know about, how you can get a liver or a kidney transplanted or arm or stuff like that. But if your immune system does not recognize it as its own, it'll start attacking it. Yeah. It's kind of scary to think of it that way, imagining that.
So that comes back to the complement system with the immune system we were talking about. So our cells in our body that are running around the circulatory system, for example, or the lymphatic system, each cell has think of it as a baseball glove. Yeah. And in that baseball glove is a tennis ball, a baseball, or a ping pong ball. Yeah. Let's say, for example, for your body, that baseball glove that you have is holding a ping pong ball. In my body, it's holding a baseball. Those are unique to us. So my baseballs are unique to me. Your ping pong balls are unique to you. For example, if you were to take my liver now and insert that into your body, and your body sees that and goes, "Those are not ping pong balls."
Yeah, it doesn't recognize there's that discrepancy.
These are different. I need to destroy that because it's foreign. It's not from my body. I need to get rid of it.
Gotcha.
And then your immune system attacks that.
Yeah, it doesn't look to understand what it is.
Yeah, what it is. Yeah. It's not programmed to do that. Exactly. It's not programmed to do that. It's programmed to defend you.
Yeah,
it's not programmed to understand. It's not programmed to understand it. It's programmed to defend you. To defend your body.
It's the whole purpose is just to take out what's foreign. And that's the way they describe it. Anything that's foreign and not part of your body, it's gone, right? So I think that's like. If I was to answer that as well, I think that's something I would put like a lot of research and funding into as well. It's kind of like finding ways to kind of tackle that organ rejection, even though it's a very complex process and it's it's not like an easy fix or easy solution. But yeah, it's interesting that our bodies have developed in a way that have that response, whereas not all organisms have that. Which is why when it comes to conditions such as HIV or AIDS is such a terrifying condition, because essentially it's a condition where your immune system stops working. That's it.
As you may well know, you've raised HIV. People who are infected with HIV, they don't die of HIV. They don't pass away.
That's not what kills them. Yeah.
It can even be a common cold that they eventually pass off.
Exactly. It's just a complete, non-immune. I don't know what the right word is. Non-immunity to any condition.
any
A lack of
condition,
immunity.
yeah,
Anything. A cold could kill you.
yeah,
A piece of bacteria could kill you.
yeah.
A lot of the negative bacteria that live on, like we mentioned,
the commensals on your skin,
yeah,
they could
some of the
become
harmful
pathogenic.
ones.
They
Exactly.
could become pathogenic and be really detrimental to your health.
Yeah, which really goes to show you just how important and our immune system is, and I guess how much we take it for granted as well. But yeah, the thing is biology, and I've always had this view when I was very young, is there's so many little interesting things, scattered throughout all biology, whether it be human, animal biology, plant biology as well. Some of that is very interesting. And I've kind of had this, interest in it from a very young age. Seeing, I had this like encyclopedia book when I was young, and this biology book, and I used to always look at it and the different aspects of biology. I used to find it very interesting. So the question I have now is, at what stage in your life, or what age did you realize that biology is what you wanted to get into?
I'd say fairly early on. So my initial acquaintance with biology was entomology, so the study of insects. So I really used to enjoy researching and searching up on ants and spiders and different species of them and what they do. And what really interested me at first when I was younger was like the most painful insect sting, or the most painful sting.
I remember seeing this online.
Yeah. So the most painful sting right now, classed on the Schmidt index, is the bullet ant.
Yeah.
And the researcher, Dr. Schmidt, who actually came up with the index, he likened the bullet ant sting to being shot with a 9mm round. So that really interested me in terms of that venom that has been developed, which causes an excruciating
tiny piece of liquid.
And literally only
it's literally a drop. It's less than a drop. Less than a drop.
Less than a drop. And that has evolved over time to become that concentrated that one sting can cause an immense amount of pain. It's
hard to
it's hard to put into context, and when you go down the pain index, you have other insects on there. So you have the tarantula hawk wasp is on there. There's another wingless species of wasp known as the cow killer. That's on there.
This one. That was like a very deadly.
That's on there as well. And it's somewhat gruesome, but it's also interesting at the same time. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting aspect of biology, the stings. And I think with biology, it's so interesting how cruel, Mother Nature can be, but fascinating at the same time. But, going back to why we're here today, right? And being here and what we're wearing as well. Talk to me about Knowness. How did you get involved in Knowness? What was your journey like with that?
So I think the context to Knowness as a whole, our founder and CEO, I've known him since year 3. So I remember I remember the first day that we met. I had a school council meeting, and it was my first school council meeting. And I just moved to Wheelers Lane Primary School, and I was quite nervous.
Yeah.
And I turned up outside the door, and I was quite nervous, a bit fidgety. And then our founder and CEO Noor comes over, and he's like, "Hey man, is everything okay? Are you calm? Like, what's happening?" I was like, "This is my first school council meeting. I'm really stressed. I'm really nervous." And he just reassured me. He was like, "All she's gonna do is ask for our opinions, and then we go and get to have our lunch." And that was it. And then ever since then, all these years later, this is at the stage that we're at.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think so now at the end. Yeah. And so you're it's the biology subject, right?
Biology.
So what does that do? What's your role?
So as of right now, I'm helping to create courses, biology related courses, for the platform.
Yeah.
So right now we've created a biosciences taster course, which basically aids students in deciding whether they want to consider biosciences or not, and then if so, which aspect of biosciences they should consider, what A-levels or international baccalaureate requirements they would need, what areas maybe potentially even connected to or outside of biosciences they need to be proficient in order to pursue a degree for further study into the field, and then what career propositions it would lead to.
So that's biology, so biological science is not biology, right?
It encompasses all of them because, we
it's
established,
marine biology.
It's so versatile. It's so varied.
So if one day I decide, if I want to study or look into what studying biology is like, or biological sciences, or any of the subjects, I can just check out this course, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So talk to me more about the actual general learning subject of biology on Knowness.
So there's a general learning taster course as well, and that's for anyone who is interested in the field of all the associated disciplines of the biosciences, and it takes you off from a very beginner level. So that would be approximately associated to your GCSE level of understanding and complexity, and it'll take you down this path where you gain more skills, more knowledge, more application, and then it'll take you down to the more complex and harder content. So the way it's split is that it'll go from beginner GCSE level, then to the intermediate level, which is more A level content, and then finally the degree level, which is the more harder concepts to grasp. But when it becomes harder, it also becomes much more interesting as well.
Yeah, that's where the real juices start flowing.
And that'll be accessible to anyone. So anyone who's interested in biology to have that platform to go from a very basic understanding to the hardcore principles. It's not offered anywhere else. Yeah. So that's what makes it unique.
Gotcha. And it's for any entry point, regardless of age or background.
Any entry point. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I've heard it being described as a kind of like a learning journey.
Yeah, it is a learning journey. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what about for sorry to interrupt, for the GCSE side of things? How does that? How is it?
So there's the GCSE revision guides as well, and the way they've been created as well is that they're specific to each exam board. So we've got some for AQA, for WJEC, for EdXL. So they're catered to each individual exam board and how the exam board specification is run. So the content and the materials align to the specifications of those exam boards.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of biology already available on Knowness and a lot more to come as well. But it's been a pleasure talking with you. There's a lot I've learned from this, and hope the viewers have as well. But that's all for now. So remember to follow us on Knowness on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all of the forms of social media. And yeah, that's it. We'll see you guys next time.